Picture a medieval town before sunrise. The streets are still wrapped in darkness. Bakers are lighting their ovens. Merchants are rolling open heavy wooden shutters. Farmers arrive with wagons that have traveled for days. Within an hour, the silence disappears beneath a storm of voices. Hundreds of negotiations erupt at once. Prices rise. Prices fall. Deals are struck with a handshake. Arguments begin over quality, weight, and payment. It looks chaotic, but it isn't. Most of us imagine medieval markets as little more than dusty squares where peasants exchange chickens for bread. A world powered by simple barter and simple lives. Yet that picture is remarkably incomplete. A medieval marketplace wasn't created by accident. It wasn't simply a convenient place where neighbors happened to meet once a week. More often than not, it was the result of careful planning, geography, and political ambition. The most successful markets emerged where rivers crossed, where ancient Roman roads still carried traffic, or where mountain passes funneled merchants into narrow corridors. These weren't just intersections of roads. They were intersections of opportunity. Some markets appeared every week. Farmers from nearby villages arrived with fresh produce, livestock, cheese, grain, and timber before returning home by sunset. These weekly gatherings kept local communities alive, ensuring food, tools, and household goods circulated efficiently. But then there were the great annual fairs, lasting days or even weeks. They attracted merchants from distant kingdoms carrying Flemish cloth, Baltic amber, Mediterranean spices, Italian silk, and Scandinavian furs. Entire regional economies synchronized around these events, with traders planning journeys months in advance. None of this happened without permission. In much of medieval Europe, a ruler, king, bishop, or powerful lord granted an official market charter. That document did far more than authorize commerce. It gave legal protection to merchants, established trading days, settled disputes under recognized laws, and often prohibited rival markets from operating nearby. A charter effectively created a government-backed commercial monopoly, drawing buyers and sellers toward one location while ensuring the authorities shared in the profits. Although medieval people never used the phrase supply and demand, they understood its logic instinctively. A poor harvest sent grain prices soaring. An unusually large wool clip pushed prices lower. Merchants constantly adjusted what they carried based on shortages, rumors, and changing demand. Every negotiation became a small calculation of scarcity, risk, and value. The rewards justified extraordinary dangers. Traders traveled hundreds of miles across forests, mountains, and rivers, despite bandits, disease, storms, and political conflict, because a successful journey could earn profits impossible to achieve at home. As commerce expanded, small villages transformed into thriving market towns. Places across England, France, and the Holy Roman Empire grew from modest settlements into prosperous centers where wealth attracted craftsmen, investment, and new residents. But as fortunes multiplied, another question emerged. If markets created so much wealth, who ultimately claimed the largest share? At first glance, the merchant appears to be the obvious winner. He arrives with a wagon full of cloth, spices, wine, or iron tools, sells everything by afternoon, and leaves with a purse noticeably heavier than when he arrived. It is an appealing story, but it is also incomplete, because long before the merchant counted his profit, someone else had already taken a share. In a medieval marketplace, almost every movement carried a price. Crossing the bridge into town often meant paying a toll. Passing through the town gate could trigger an entry tax. Setting up a stall required rent. Selling grain or wool using the official scales meant paying weighing fees. Measuring cloth with the town's approved yardstick came with another charge. If foreign coins had to be exchanged into locally accepted currency, money changers earned their commission before the first sale was even completed. One transaction could quietly generate income for half a dozen different parties. The remarkable part is that these payments rarely felt connected. Each fee seemed small on its own. Yet together they formed a remarkably efficient system of revenue collection. Medieval governments did not have sophisticated income taxes or nationwide tax agencies. Instead, they positioned themselves directly inside the flow of commerce, collecting wealth every time trade occurred. The rights to collect these revenues were themselves valuable assets. A local lord might own the bridge and claim every toll. A monastery or cathedral could possess legal rights to operate the market, earning dependable income week after week without selling a single product. Kings often issued exclusive market charters, granting one town the legal privilege to host official trading while preventing nearby rivals from competing. Commerce became a controlled resource, and those controlling access frequently earned more than those doing the trading. A surviving English market charter illustrates the logic. The document did not simply authorize buying and selling. It carefully defined who could collect rents, who enforced market law, which tolls belonged to the lord, and what portion ultimately flowed to the crown. Every successful market day became a carefully divided stream of revenue. Imagine a market hosting 250 merchants. Even if each trader paid only a handful of modest fees throughout the day, for entry, a stall, official weighing, and road or bridge access, the combined collections could equal months of agricultural income from surrounding farmland. The marketplace wasn't merely creating wealth. It was redistributing it upward through an invisible network of rights, privileges, and obligations. And if controlling the market meant controlling its income, the next question becomes even more important. How did rulers convince merchants to keep coming back year after year? For most medieval merchants, producing a valuable product was only the beginning. The real challenge was getting it to market before time, weather, or violence erased every possibility of profit. In many cases, transportation, not production, became the single largest expense in the entire business. Roads were unpredictable. Some followed the remnants of Roman engineering, but many deteriorated into muddy tracks that became nearly impassable after heavy rain. A wagon could sink axle deep in mud. A broken wheel might delay a journey for days. Every delay meant feeding horses, paying assistants, and watching valuable inventory lose time-sensitive value. Distance multiplied every risk. A merchant carrying barrels of wine from France, wool from England, or salt from Central Europe wasn't simply calculating miles. He was calculating probabilities. Would the river remain navigable? Would an early snowfall close a mountain pass? Would disease spread through the caravan? Would bandits be waiting beyond the next forest? River transport offered a cheaper alternative whenever possible. A single boat could move far more cargo than several wagons while requiring fewer animals and workers. But rivers created their own uncertainties. Water levels changed with the seasons. Floods destroyed docks. Frozen waterways could halt commerce entirely. The cheapest route was not always the fastest, and the fastest route was rarely the safest. Then came the hidden operating costs. Horses consumed food whether they were moving or standing still. Wagons demanded constant repairs. Drivers expected wages. Guards were often hired for dangerous stretches of road, particularly when carrying luxury goods. Storage added another layer of expense, especially for merchants forced to wait for market day. Grain spoiled. Fruit rotted. Cloth absorbed moisture. Every extra day increased the chance that inventory would lose value before reaching a buyer. This was medieval supply chain management in its rawest form. Every decision involved balancing cost against risk. Merchants quietly built the equivalent of insurance into their prices, charging more not only for the goods themselves, but also for every danger overcome along the journey. Depending on distance, terrain, and security conditions, transportation could consume a substantial share of a product's final selling price. Success, therefore, belonged to those who mastered logistics as much as trade. But even after surviving the journey and paying every hidden cost, merchants faced another challenge that could determine whether they earned a fortune or suffered a devastating loss. That challenge was information. Walk through a medieval marketplace, and one detail quickly becomes impossible to ignore. Two merchants might be selling nearly identical products, standing only a few stalls apart, yet charging noticeably different prices. It wasn't always because one product was better. More often, it was because one merchant understood something that economists would not formally describe for centuries. People rarely buy with logic alone. The first price spoken during a negotiation carried enormous influence. A cloth merchant asking for a high opening price established an anchor, making every later concession feel like a bargain even if the final amount remained comfortably profitable. Buyers believed they had won the negotiation. In reality, the negotiation had often been shaped from the very first number. Scarcity worked just as effectively. A spice trader might quietly mention that only a few sacks remained before the next caravan arrived months later. Whether entirely true or slightly exaggerated, the message changed the buyer's mindset. Waiting suddenly felt expensive. Buying immediately felt safer. Trust was equally valuable. Medieval commerce depended on reputation long before brands or customer reviews existed. A blacksmith known for forging durable tools could charge more than an unknown competitor because customers expected fewer costly replacements. A livestock dealer with a reputation for honest measurements attracted repeat buyers who valued certainty over the lowest possible price. Confidence itself became part of the product. At the same time, information was rarely shared equally. Experienced merchants knew which harvests had failed, which roads were blocked, or which luxury goods were becoming scarce in distant regions. Buyers often lacked that knowledge, creating an information advantage that skilled traders could quietly convert into higher margins. Negotiations were also remarkably public. Crowds gathered around expensive purchases, listening to every offer and counteroffer. Social pressure influenced both sides. A merchant reluctant to appear desperate might reject a reasonable bid. A buyer determined to look successful could pay more than planned rather than walk away empty-handed. Even appearance mattered. A tidy stall carefully displayed goods, and confident presentation signaled quality before a single word was spoken. Centuries before behavioral economics had a name, medieval markets were already proving a timeless truth. Value exists not only in the product, but in the story, confidence, and perception surrounding it. Yet there was another force shaping every transaction, one far more powerful than psychology alone. It was the law. It is easy to assume that every medieval transaction ended with a handful of silver coins changing hands. In reality, that would have been remarkably inefficient. Coin was heavy, vulnerable to theft, and often in short supply. As trade expanded across Europe, merchants discovered that moving trust was frequently easier than moving money. Credit became the invisible fuel of the marketplace. A cloth merchant might receive a shipment in spring but agree to pay the supplier after the summer fair. A blacksmith could obtain iron today with the promise of settling the debt once finished tools had been sold. These delayed payment agreements allowed business to continue even when cash was scarce, turning confidence into a form of working capital. Simple written acknowledgments, what we would recognize as IOs, circulated between trusted traders. Merchant partnerships spread both risk and opportunity, allowing several investors to finance expensive cargo together, rather than exposing a single individual to ruin. If one journey failed, the loss was shared. If it succeeded, everyone benefited. For merchants traveling hundreds of miles, carrying large quantities of coin created another problem. Every mile increased the chance of robbery. Instead of transporting wealth physically, experienced traders often relied on money changers and bills of exchange. A merchant could deposit funds in one commercial center, receive a written document, and redeem its value elsewhere through trusted financial networks. The paper itself held little intrinsic value. The reputation behind it held everything. This required careful bookkeeping. Merchants recorded debts, repayments, partnerships, and obligations with growing precision because memory alone could no longer manage increasingly complex businesses. Trade was becoming too sophisticated for informal promises. Yet the most valuable asset was neither silver nor parchment. It was reputation. A merchant known for honoring agreements found suppliers willing to extend generous credit. Guild membership reinforced that confidence, offering collective guarantees that reduced uncertainty for everyone involved.